What did I learn in the last 6 months? I get way more time to do that now. I do realize that I don't care about tech as much as I used to. It's amazing what happens when you kind of decouple the need to care and actually caring. And so I don't care as much, but there's lots of aspects of tech that I do like. So I'm still a technical advisor to about 10 startups, companies like Docker, lesser known companies like Q Labs behind this validation configuration language, very fringe, and then everything in between. I never thought it would happen. I don't own a vest, but I do a lot of investing these days. I do a lot of due diligence for a full-blown VC. It's very interesting because they have ethics, which typically doesn't go together, but it works. So I do about maybe 15 to 20 deep dive due diligence every year before we cut that check. A green light, red light, if it all checks out. So some amazing founders still building, and I think I do still get excited when I see what they're building and they actually believe in it. AI is a red flag to me because if you lead with AI, then there's probably nothing else there. But I do see a lot of founders that have managed to build something incredible, and then they save AI to the end to talk about how it's implemented. And so that's been really great. The other things that I do, surprisingly, I still get booked to speak at conferences. And the other part that's dope is they don't care what tech I talk about. They actually care what I think about things in general. So I figured tonight I'm going to do a lot of Q&A, so all questions will be fair game. But in the last 6 months, what did I learn? My daughter went with me to my second tech conference. It was in New York with platform engineering. On the flight, I was like, you're going to see how incredibly uncool I am. Because a lot of my peers, it's just interesting. So you know your dad plays Magic the Gathering, so be fully prepared. And so we got there, and she met a lot of people on the floor. She's like, Dad, is this what you do? I'm like, not exactly, but close enough. And I give this presentation, I'm talking about platform engineering as a philosophy, the fundamentals of it, what I learned over this 20-year period. And then there was this fireside chat section, okay? I'm super confident. I finished my talk. A couple of easy questions came out of the audience, super easy. My daughter's sitting in the front row. And then my talk is over. I'm like, yes, I'm out of here. And then the organizer said, Kelsey, we have one more question. I was like, bring it. I do this for a living. And they gave the microphone to my daughter. I was like, I live with you. This will be easy. So I thought, and I'm sitting there, and she asked, with all this talk about AI, what's the future for people like me? So my daughter, she's in school for software engineering, informatics. She showed me her website written by hand, using React with no frameworks. Super proud of her. But she also hears all the narratives. AI is doing all of these things. AI writes all the code. She even used some of these tools, right? There are some websites you can go to. You can give it an idea, and it spits out a working website. Now, is it super secure? No. But it can do a better job than she can do at this stage of her career. So she asked questions. She said, Dad, you had the benefit of going through being a junior, being new, companies being patient, you actually getting skills to the point where you can stand on stage and say what you're saying. What about me? And you can tell I'm emotional, and I was emotional and I couldn't talk for 3 whole minutes. Like tears came to my eyes because for the first time in my career, didn't have an answer. Because there are some companies that talk about AI and they love this idea of cost reduction, right? We can get rid of all of these people. Look at our bottom line going up. Like if you've ever listened to any of these earning calls, this is the thing that delights a shareholder because margins are the most important thing for most businesses when they're owned by shareholders. So you hear this stuff and there are people who work at these companies like, I can't believe my CEO is talking like this. And then it becomes even more real when they do a 10% layoff of the whole company. So it's not just a theory, it has literally happened. And for some of you, it's happened 3 times, right? We're going to do 10% and 10% and 10%. You're like, God damn, who do we keep? And I've been talking to people, and I do this thing on LinkedIn where people will ping me, and they say, hey, Kelsey, I learned Kubernetes from you. Thank you. I don't know to apologize, but they say thank you. And then sometimes we get on the phone one-on-one, and you can tell they've been through all of this stuff. And like, Kelsey, what does the future hold? Now, the old Kelsey has always seen technology, even the disruptive technology, as something that we can either complain about or help guide where we would like it to go instead. I'm going to try to give you a good example. When I used to work at Puppet Labs, I lived in Portland for 8 years. A lot of people don't know that. Like, Kelsey, welcome to Portland. Like, dude, I lived here for 8 years, paid taxes and everything. I used to live off of 10th and Hoyt, walking distance to Powell's, and I was working at Puppet Labs. And at the time, this is around 2012, and 2 years prior, I was in financial services, and I had graduated to become a developer there, but largely a system administrator. I brought Puppet into this financial services company. I remember the version, 0.24.8. Why that? Is because that's what Red Hat shipped, and that's what you're getting. Yum install Puppet. And I remember I was adding all of these features in my free time because you weren't allowed to work on open source. And my manager one day goes to a conference and he comes back and he's like, Kelsey, I now understand what you've been doing the last 2 years. I'm like, what have I been doing? Because you haven't been helping. He said, you're doing DevOps. And in my mind, I'm like, how dare you try to name a thing you don't understand? You're just bringing words and trying to apply it to the thing I'm doing, because what I ended up doing is I moved my desk from the second floor to the third floor. System administrators and the business system analysts and the QA people, you all sit on the second floor. Developers sit on the third. It's on the org chart and everything. We have an agreement with HR. You can't go up there. And I moved my desk one day. My manager's like, Kelsey, what the hell? And then I was like, well, we're just getting work done. And Puppet is helping. And so it took him 2 years, and he kind of realized that this was a good thing because he heard it at a conference. And I remember him inviting, there's a guy named James Turnbull. He wrote the Puppet book. He also worked at Puppet Labs right here down the way. And he invited him to the office. And I never met James Turnbull, but I read his book. And I was contributing to open source Puppet in my free time. Careful not to tell anyone, because you probably would have gotten fired if they knew you were actually getting things done versus working at the pace of the enterprise. And I remember my manager was like bragging so much, like, James Turnbull, he is the expert. He's going to have a meeting with us to show us how to use Puppet like the professionals do. Now, I'm thinking to myself, like, yo, like, I'm standing here, bro. And we had gotten Puppet to the point where no one knew it was there. You could open a Jira ticket, couple of custom fields, and when you hit save and it got approved, Puppet ran underneath the covers and you never knew. My friends in the audience, he even gave that tool a name. He called it Mr. Resetti. I'm like, what's Mr. Resetti? You never played Animal Farm or Farmville or whatever? What is it called? Animal Crossing. And I was like, what the hell is Mr. Resetti doing? He's like, if you don't turn off the game properly, Mr. Resetti shows up and like, you didn't turn off the game properly. So before you can play, I'm going to explain why that's important. I'm like, all right, Mr. Resetti it is. So we had this user in Jira named Mr. Resetti that would take all the automation tickets and respond quick as hell. They were like, hey, who's this Mr. Resetti guy? We would just laugh. Like, we just hired him last week. So James Turnbull shows up and he comes in and my manager's like, that's James Turnbull. I was like, oh, that's dope. He wrote the book and everything. And so we're on our way to the third floor and we're all in this elevator. And James Turnbull is like, oh, you're Kelsey Hightower. And I'm like, goddamn right, in my head. I just said out loud, goddamn right, I'm Kelsey Hightower. We love your contributions at Puppet Labs. And my manager's like, what the hell is going on here? I met him first. So we go upstairs and I show everything that we're doing. And manager's like, yeah, so what can we be doing different? He's just like, I don't know, man. That should be a case study for us. And I remember, maybe it didn't go so well, but it's the end of the day. It's 4 o'clock now. And this is in Atlanta. So I'm working about an hour away from the airport with no traffic. It's 5 o'clock now. It's 2 hours. And they were going to call a cab for him to just, thank you for coming. Cab will be here. I was like, I'll drive you to the airport. And so James Turnbull's in the front seat and he took the tie off. He had all these tattoos and I think he put his nose ring back in. And I was like, what the hell is all this? He's like, I'm from Portland, dude. I just did this for you all. And he's Australian. Have you ever heard Australian people curse? It's funny. And he had all these customers like, damn, you're literally a different person. And he invited me to give my first ever real conference talk. And so I gave this talk at Puppet Conf right around the corner from here. 2011, maybe 2012. And I wore my glasses and everything because I wanted to look smart. Didn't need them, but I put them on. I was so insecure at that moment. And I remember I gave this talk and the team was like, hey, you want to come by the office to meet everyone? And it was a job interview. And Luke Canese, the founder of Puppet, damn near offered before I got back on the plane. So I head back to Atlanta. I see my manager. He's like, how'd it go? I say, it went fantastic for me. And I resigned in his office. And the funny thing is, he said something dope. He said, I can't believe you were here this long. Like, you have something special. And so that felt good. It was like, yeah, I guess I did. And I go to Puppet Labs, and I'm going to speed up the Puppet Labs component because I don't go through all of that. But we were the disruptors, right? DevOps required new tools, even though it wasn't about the tools. It also brought this cultural element. And we were telling people that there was a better way of doing it, and we were actually building the tools to do it. So it was the first time in my career I would actually join a tech company building tools that we would all use throughout the industry. And then I watched Puppet get disrupted. I remember when Docker came out, it's almost like you couldn't say the name. Eric was there with me. He remembers very clearly. And when it's like, oh, it's a fad, it's more than containers, config is still important. I was like, I don't know, man. This feels different. And then around the same time, Terraform came out. They had one thing in common, they're written in Golang. And I remember being that Puppet, I was like, I gotta learn Go because this feels like something's happening here. And I remember there's a component in Puppet called Factor. Right, if you've ever used configuration management tool Puppet, there's this little thing called Factor, and its job is to get the facts about the machine so that Puppet could use it as it's resolving your configuration management run. I was like, I'm gonna write it in Golang. It's lightweight, it's thin, we get rid of Ruby, we can do things in parallel, this is gonna be awesome. And I built it and it's like, you can't do that. I was like, why? Does it run on AIX? I'm like, AIX? Are you serious? Because we've gotten to the point now where we're just like corporate and all these things, and I just think we lost our way in terms of pushing the bar. And so I had to leave Puppet. And that starts my journey into like containers and CoreOS into where I'm here now. The reason why I told you that story is because I got a chance to go through that and disrupt things and things get disrupted. And so when I'm trying to answer this question to my daughter, I'm thinking for the first time, she'll never get that opportunity if we don't change our philosophy around this thing called AI. And so there's a bit of me that has been fearful. So this is the other thing I kind of learned about AI. Talking to all these founders, especially the ones that actually know what they're doing, I would ask them to explain how are you using AI in great detail, no magic. And the great ones were able to do it very quickly. And I remember one day I was complaining about trying one of the ChatGPT open source models, the ones that can run on your laptop. And I asked it a question. I was like, what version of FreeBSD is required for application containers or jails? And if you go to the website, it's an unreleased version of FreeBSD. If you're BS15, it's not out yet. It will be coming soon. And FreeBSD is going from like OS containers to something like similar to what Docker does with like application containers. And this thing just started making things up. Hey, FreeBSD 13, it'll totally be fine. I'm like, nah, so I know this is wrong. So I went online and I said something like, this stuff is like totally stupid because like, look what it's doing. And one person made me feel really good about myself by telling me why I was wrong. It's like, Kelsey, using an LLM and asking it a question that you haven't given it the answer for is an anti-pattern. So either it's in its training set and you do your training run and its worldview that it builds, it can answer questions from that. You can give it a RAG implementation like a lookup table, and then it can go check and then find that and give your answer to it. Or you can give the answer in your prompt. And you think about that for a second, like what utility is like, which way should I go? Before you answer, turn left, turn right, then right again. Which way should I go? And you tell me exactly that, and we're impressed by this. But when you think about it, imagine it being a 1,000-page financial statement that you don't have time to read. And so you provide that financial statement in your context window or in your code base if you wanted to refactor something for you. The answer is embedded in the thing you've given it. And then you make your prompt, and then it's able to read that thing, make sense of it, and then give you a summary. And for a lot of people, that is impressive. So when we think about the use cases like writing code, generating unit tests from an existing code base, it starts to make sense. My fear went away. I went back to my daughter and said, I got it now. You have to be able to prove why you as a human can produce something that computers aren't able to do. It's like that. If it comes to typing and remembering things, the computer will always have me beat. I was like, exactly. So you're going to have to learn to do what your dad learned to do towards the tail end of his computer. You're going to have to learn to actually talk to and inspire people. If you can figure out what people are trying to do and you give them a way of doing it, you're probably going to be safe. And she said, well, put that in context. I was like, look, a lot of people that I talk to in circles like this, they want to talk about storage drivers, Kubernetes, containers, performance. You're probably going to be done for because that will get easier over time. And the reason being is because you are actually building those tools that's going to make it easier over time. The people who are really good at this will say, your cloud bill is how much? 100 million? I can get it to 50. I don't care how you do it. Kubernetes, Lambda, VMs, one big ass VM, doesn't matter. If you pull that off, you're probably going to be safer than the people who just want to run to the solutions. So long story short, I think technology is still cool in the fact that you can use it to build whatever you want. But my perspective to pay attention to the human condition and hopefully nudge the world to still give people like my daughter a chance to go through that experience that I got to go through. And I'm hoping you all are doing the same. So if you're hiring, please don't use AI tools to hire people. Take a phone call, do phone screens, do in-person interviews. If you're the type of person that's hiring, please remember there's a human on the other side. That's all I got for now, and we're just going to do Q&A. Thank you. Paris has your hand up.
So you mentioned your daughter, the continued series it. So I did that a lot of younger generation coming out. Let's say look at the store singular athletes within something that it is what it today and it's just some car air to like but having you take the courage that to go through auto flyer decompression. The kind of get encouraged that is social during.
Yeah, so I think when I got into tech, like 1999 is when I graduated high school. Immediately got A+ certification, did the contract jobs, moved around, web hosting, the whole nine. It wasn't until the middle of my career that the open source bulb lit up for me because just like you, Red Hat was already popular. Open source was a given. Linux was already starting to become dominant. You went to CompUSA, like the computer store, And they were giving this stuff away for free in the Linux magazine. There's always like a disc in there, 8,000 free applications. Like, I can only use 2 of them. But so open source at that moment for me was always a given. Like, people built free stuff and I used it for free. And then when I went to PyCon for the first time, and I remember working on distutils and virtual env, and I remember going to PyCon and I was always contributing online. But there's something special at the PyCon conferences where after the conference, people stay like a whole nother week, even over the weekend. And all the people, Guido van Rossum, all the maintainers are in this room helping new people like me get commit access, get your keys set up. And then that part where I made a contribution and the whole world of people that are using Python tooling immediately was impacted by it. And I think that is still real. Like, just saying the words open source and we tell them about the philosophy, we show them some of the characters in our space, it may not be compelling on its own. But that part where you go and people, like, you feel the impact of your work. I mean, I think the first time I ever had someone give a talk about a project that I built a configuration management tool called CompD. And I remember going to FOSDEM, really cool open source conference in Europe. And I'm standing in the back of the room and the person comes up and he's like, all right, my talk is about CompD and how awesome it is. And I'm like, yeah, that shit is pretty awesome. But it was so dope seeing someone that I never met showing people how much value they were getting out of it. So I think, again, these people are still people, and you just got to take them to feel the benefits of it. So my approach would be, you got to take them and let them feel the benefits of it versus just saying, hey, there's this thing called open source, and it would be really cool if you work for free. Like, it's not very compelling.
I'm kind of curious, like, being in an industry that's been disrupted and riding that all the way through, or disruptor to being disrupted eventually, and, like, seeing that happen again, what advice would you give to people who might leak through that to weather it better on the other side?
Yeah, I remember my manager at Google, Eric Brewer, eventually. I remember I had just become principal engineer. And he was like, the classic, the thing that got you here won't get you to the next level. And at a place like Google, there's like 200,000 employees. There's like less than 200 distinguished engineers, I believe. And I remember asking him, like, hey, like, what do you think? What's next for me? He's like, there's only 2 important things at this point, is impact and influence. That's it. Everything else comes and goes, right? So if you're on a team and you're oblivious to what's happening in the world, one day the tickets will stop flowing to you. One day you'll wake up and you're going to be reporting to a new manager. What happened? Another reorg. That's the status quo. But I think for people that know that these waves come and go, so like if you have a 10-year career, that means you've seen 1 or 2 waves come and go. So the first bit was, for me, I had to zoom out. There's other waves happening. In Medicare or in the health industry, people are curing diseases, far more impact than the JavaScript you may or may not be writing. So those waves are occurring. There's waves occurring everywhere. So you're not privy to those and you don't care about those and you're just fine. So I think the first thing is the fear of missing out. You just got to stop. But if you're going to choose to surf the wave, you got to ask yourself, do you just want to be there and just go wherever the wave takes you? That's one way to do it. There were so many people I saw 10 years ago at KubeCon like, I don't know about this Kubernetes thing, man. I'm just going to hold off on it for a moment. 10 years later, yeah, I got my Kubernetes certification, even this Kubernetes tattoo. I'm like, I don't know, man, 10 years. It might not be cool again. So what I decided to do in my career was like, he told me, you can actually influence and nudge things in a different direction. Every keynote you give, every presentation you give, every prototype you give, every open source repository you give, might inspire the industry to actually go in a different direction. When I started contributing to Kubernetes, I remember the very first thing I contributed to Kubernetes was how to even run the damn thing. So Google's like, hey, embargo, we're going to launch this thing tomorrow. It's going to kill everybody, ha ha ha. But you can't say anything till tomorrow. So they give us GitHub access. I'm at CoreOS at this point. So the Docker wave is going. So if you're in a Docker wave, you're like, Docker, all the things. And you didn't know that tomorrow you were about to be disrupted. So you were good. 12 more hours, right? Your post is still killing it on Hacker News. Not tomorrow. And so I get into this thing and I look at it. I'm at CoreOS. We're building orchestration tools too. And I look at the repository and I finally figured out how to get everything to build and assemble all the pieces. And I documented everything. And I just said, this is it. Everything we're doing at CoreOS, I don't think it competes with this. And I remember when the press release came from Google, it landed #1 on Hacker News. We waited the agreed upon 15 minutes later. And we said that thing, but here's how you actually use it. And then I nudged people because I showed you how to use it on CoreOS, the importance of etcd. I remember starting to build these little, before we called them operators. That name comes from Alex Povey, the CEO and founder of CoreOS. And it was like, hey, you know what? We can do things like let's encrypt and have this control loop that brings it in. And it was all the things that I learned from Puppet, like the way nodes work, that comes from Puppet, right? Generate a certificate, give it to the API server for signing. That is exactly how Puppet works. And so I decided that, you know what, I'm not going to sit this one out. I'm going to nudge people in a particular direction. I think Kubernetes should do this. Matter of fact, let me show you how it should work. 3 people started KubeCon. Me, Patrick Riley, and Joseph Jacks. We started at GopherCon, the Go conference. 3 people. And Patrick put up the money. We did it in San Francisco 2 years before the CNCF comes around. So that told me that you can nudge it, like a single person can nudge these things. So when I look at the waves now, I always like, man, there's the question of where's it going to go? And people like to participate on it. But there's one phrase, and I'll end here with this particular question. It's easy to predict the future when you're working on it. So whenever I see these new big things, I'm always figuring like, how do I want to nudge it? And the world's big enough just to let you do it.
I got a call today from a friend in Kenya who is a web developer who just graduated from boot camp, and he's very incredibly motivated and learning really quickly. But in the conversation with him, I kind of learned that the material he's learning, in my opinion, is a little bit maybe outdated for a little bit basic to our current AI code generation paradigm that we're in. And it kind of opened my eyes to the fact that maybe the amount of code generation that we get capabilities has given us those perhaps widening the capabilities between what's happening maybe here in the US, other places. And I guess my question is like, what can we, it's not this better, but like, what can we do to be more inclusive and be more, like, what can we do to not let that gap get wider to the fact that they're in a way that's people with more access, more availability to schools are able to be generated for and able to do more. Like, yeah.
I know where you're going with this. I was at Google, it was like year 4 in Google. Google has these like crazy hacker competitions. Leak code people fail at these. And I remember there was like a Nigerian kid, 14 years old, and he won this competition. He's in a village where he has to go to a certain place to use the internet to get the particular challenge. And he wins the challenge with a Chromebook. Now everyone knows you can use all the internet you want. You submit your results, and then they figure out who is number 1 in the world. And a 14-year-old dude in Nigeria. Why does he win? The thing we forget is that all those fundamentals, the outdated stuff, PHP is still valid. How to open a file is still valid. How to create a socket is still valid. What is an IP address? Still valid. I'm seeing a lot of vibe coders, and I remember there was I was doing due diligence. Young dude was like, yo, man, we're going to revolutionize the sales process. I was like, how you going to do it? He's like, oh, we got this LLM. You put this over here, blah, blah. I was like, oh, shit, that's a lot of stuff. I said, I got a question for you, though. Have you ever sold anything? He was like, nah. I was like, I don't know if you understand what's involved in the sales process. When you're selling expensive things, it's not about filling out contracts and, generating a sales order. It's like how I feel. This is why they take people to dinner. This is why they take them to sporting events. They want to get to know them. So when I think about people that are on that learning curve, learn the fundamentals. You probably have a lot of experience, so you can tell that he's learning something a little outdated. I would say fundamentals. I don't care where people start with the fundamentals. Let them cook. Let it bake. Because there's a lot of people, and I've met a few of them, they only know Kubernetes. Like, what's Linux? I'm like, nah, you're not serious, are you? Like, Kelsey, I don't know what that, is that the thing underneath Kubernetes? And I'm sitting there, it's like, we skipped a step. This is why Kubernetes or Hardware was written. Before we get to Kubernetes, I need you to know what SSH is. I need you to know what a binary is. I need you to know what a config file is. I need you to know what an SSL certificate is. So I would say the fact that they now have access to learn the fundamentals, we're winning. We've made some progress. I would caution against believing that there's this huge divide being created, because what I'm seeing is people will revert to the mean. People will start to just become what the LLM can become. I remember when Java came out at that very same financial institution where I introduced Puppet, most of the software developers didn't know how a terminal or a computer worked. If the JVM didn't do it, they couldn't understand it. Like, I know how to bind an SSL certificate to a web server and what the handshake is doing, and how to check if it's expired using the various command line tools. He was like, look, if it doesn't work with the JVM, I have no idea what to do. That's a problem. Did it make him more efficient at writing certain types of applications? 100%. Could he troubleshoot them? Absolutely not. So I would just say, you take that person, say, hey, you're learning good things. Here's the fundamentals that you're learning. And here's how those fundamentals map to the new thing. Right? Some people only know Next.js. Some people actually know React. When Next.js does something weird in the browser, they know where to look. Right? So I would say they're not far behind. So if you wanted to close that gap, teach them.
I guess the theorems guessing is that maybe access is a wiping that gap for creating. So is that what you're using?
No, I honestly, I was traveling, I was in Europe just last week, and the conference got bigger, right? It's a small container conference. It went from 1,000 people to 1,500 people, and capital doesn't flow the same. Like in the U.S., capital flows crazy. People have stupid apps, $10 million funding. It's like, what does your app do? Nothing. That's the funny part. It's like, wow. Over there, you got to like prove a real business model. And they were like happy for the first time. It's like, hey, all that stuff you guys are doing in the U.S., the flow of capital is happening. Sovereignty is being a big deal. Lots of countries are fearful that just using Microsoft, Google, and Amazon for everything is a mistake. Our sovereignty is now on the line. And so now they're starting to invest in these local groups. So one thing I would also say is like access isn't about doing everything the U.S. does or competing with all the U.S. things. If you're in one of these places in the world that has none of these things, that means you get to be the first, right? In the history books, the first person in Kenya to create a search engine, the first person in X to do X, Y, Z. You see what I mean? So to me, all I see is opportunity at this point. There's like 6 billion more people that are yet to experience the full vast of what we have. There are going to be people from those individual countries, cities, towns, and villages that will be the first one to make an Uber clone. And they're going to do it in a context that Uber doesn't understand, right? This is why Uber is doing acquisitions of other companies that have localized ride-hailing services. So the way I look at the world is, it's just me, honestly. I don't see a world where I lose unless I give up. So a person like that, they have all the mechanics I need to just be a teacher. That's it. That's all I can do. Oh, go here.
Virgin technologies. JavaScript and Python are what popular languages. But from an AI standpoint, do you think it's better to specialize it to
technology like learning Scala or learning Rust or learning something that LLMs aren't so good on?
Learning Scala is probably never a good idea.
To see plus the fewer programming languages where it just is a lot of training data, these LLMs. Would that get you better?
No. There's a reason why there isn't a large training set for things like Haskell and Scala. There's a reason, right? Like you ever go to the store and it's like one milk is like $8. The other milk is like $1.25. You're thinking like, what? Milk is milk. And one of them has like today's date on it, right? Something's different about these things. That's not how you're going to get job security because it's only a matter of time, right? It's only a matter of time before these things catch up to your niche of the world. And also, these niches can be dangerous, right? There's some people who are really good at data center stuff. They're struggling right now, even with the data center boom, right? I can rack a server faster than anyone else. I can make a Cat5 cable by hand. Orange, right? Orange, green, white. That's over, bro. That's over, right? So I would probably say this. I think if you zoom out and you understand the big picture to the point where you can tell an LLM what to do, that's good job security. If you can get people to get to whatever goal they want to get to without all the hoopla, that's good job security. Because whatever job you have now is eventually going to go away. That's the way I always thought about it. So this idea that you're just going to be safe, I think that's over with. I don't know if there's going to be any more safety by being static. So just be a learner. So if you can learn Scala, that means you can learn Python. Python came back into fashion. Right? There was a dude in Python who was like, I refuse to learn any other language. Python to the end. They had a rough 10 years. Like between OpenStack and ChatGPT, it was rough. And then a gift was given. Right? When all of this stuff came back, TensorFlow, PyTorch, they were back on top. 29 years of Python experience, baby. Right? So sometimes it's just like just being adaptable and adjusting. But the language, I think, has very little to do with it because you have no idea where it's going to come back to. We'll take maybe 2 more. How much time do we have? Oh, we're 7:15. Yeah. All right.
Yeah, I got it. That's really about technology. It's about balancing the needs of the place we swap client for money at and the community. Kubernetes built for the back of the community. How did you deal with that? And you're at your for-profit company, had its bull, rooted, and might be going in a different direction. We're a big piece of it. How do you manage that? Technology's big. Yeah, that all changes.
All right, so first step is like, this is like the first step to all this freedom stuff and being able to make these type of decisions. You got to get financially set. A lot of people in tech made a lot of money. They didn't pay off their houses. They didn't save. They thought it was going to run forever. I was very, this minimalist thing was for a reason. It's so I could actually have that wiggle room. So that financial piece goes a long way. So that term FU money, it's important because that's the thing that gives you the courage and the safety net to do what you believe is right and sometimes make a bad bet. When you don't have that, when it comes to the need to work, then everything I'm saying next doesn't matter. Because like Kelsey, that doesn't work if I don't have the safety net, I need this job. I've been a manager before. I've seen people that are scared to say something because their visa may get revoked. It's this job or go home. So there's so many things that goes into what makes a human feel like they can even ask for balance. If you need a job really, really bad, you know it isn't right that they're asking you to work on the weekend, but you feel stuck, then like you're going to work on the weekend, no matter what I say. So I just want to preface it with that because there's a reality behind this. There's a guy named Simon Wardley that I met when I was at leaving Puppet, going to CoreOS. I got invited to this place called Food Camp, Friends of O'Reilly, so the people who publish the books. In California, they just have random people come together. Some are big names in tech. Some people work at a golf course, picking up the balls, nothing else. And they just all come together and just learn from each other. Open sessions. And I met this guy named Simon Worley. He has this thing called Worley Maps, and he shows people all these strategic things. And we stayed at the whole hotel, the same hotel that was like 30 minutes from the venue. We got our hotels late, ended up in the same place. And I drove with him every morning, and we would have breakfast. I said, look, you do all this mapping stuff where you try to give people this idea that to make a real strategic decision, you can't just put it on a, spreadsheet or a side-by-side pros versus cons. You have to think about this almost in a 3D landscape, this positioning and movement, and you have to understand the whole landscape, what your competitors are doing and where you would like the industry to go. And I thought about it, I was like, I don't care about any of that, to be honest, but I do want to know how I can map my own career. It's like, well, where are you standing and what can you change in that particular landscape? And so I thought about it as like, yeah, I do have way more control than I want. So I started to put the strategy together. At the end of my dot was early retirement as part of the plan. And to get to that point, I also needed to figure out how to quadruple my income. It's a crazy thing to say. A lot of us get paid well. Quadruple your income? Is that even possible? Turns out you can do things like that. You can even 10x your income. It's like wild out here. And so you put this stuff on a map and I'm like, okay, I have to put myself in position. And I started having a slightly different mindset. I don't want to be good at something. I want to be the best at something. It's like, well, Kelsey, that's a lot of pressure. It's like, yeah, but a lot of people aren't trying that hard. So think about it. What will it take for you to be the top 10,000 in the world at Terraform? It wouldn't take a lot. Just go contribute upstream, maintain one of the modules that is neglected. You're vaulted into the top probably 500 people on Earth in Terraform. So when you say I'm the top 500 on Earth in Terraform, that means I need double what the other people writing Terraform are getting. And then I only do Terraform because I'm in the top 500 in the world. So that means wherever I go, it has to be Terraform. And you have to let me contribute to Terraform or you won't get the full value of who I am. So now you start to tilt the scales to the balance you want. And then you're interviewing. Every keynote, every post, every podcast is an interview. You're telling the next employer what it's going to be. I'm a top 500 contributor to Terraform. This is what I do. My expertise helps companies in this very explicit way. I don't want to go anywhere that doesn't understand that. There's going to be a few companies in the world that say that's exactly what we're looking for. And so now they know what they're hiring. I'm not applying for jobs in this case. They're hiring something very specific. When I went to Google, no resume. They didn't ask for one. Oh, we know who you are. You're the Kubernetes guy. You wrote the book. We see the code. We know who you are. Just want to see if you're a good fit here. And so the balance played my way because I was telling the market, this is what I want to do, and this is how you're going to get the most impact. Luckily for me, Google made a lot of money off of open source Kubernetes. But this story is not very different than the one I told you about Puppet Labs, right? I was at that company. I brought in Puppet. I started contributing, built a name for myself. Luckily, things lined up, and that's the element of luck that comes in. So to me, if you want to dictate the terms, you almost got to show people what the contract is. I know it sounds odd because a lot of people are like, there's a job posting, I apply to it, I look at the requirements and I try to match the requirements. You can totally do that. That's the default, that's normal. But there's also the other game you can play to say, this is who I am, this is what I do, and this is all I will accept. And then those companies just have to make a different decision. And that's the way I did it. So the last 3 or 4 jobs I had, it always worked in that order. CompD was built on etcd. That caught the eye of CoreOS. I'm at CoreOS. Again, no resume. I'm at CoreOS. I become a contributor, get commit access to Kubernetes. All of my keynotes are directing the community where to go. We start this conference called the Eye of Google. Google's like, you can work from home. You can have that too. You can have that too. Sure, no problem. Are you sure? No problem. Right? And so that's where that comes from. That's the route. I don't know if that's going to work for you, but I do think it's a way of going about it. So don't be shy about that. Tell people what you want it to be. And again, you have to back it up with skill. You can't just say these things and not have the skill and proof to go behind it. But boy, when you do, And I'm pretty sure you've been around the block long enough and you've seen it pan out as well. All right, last question here, and then we'll let everyone out for the networking.
Well, we'll have one more thing after the last question.
Okay, something special?
Yeah.
Okay.
I just want to know, like, how would you advocate for hiring more junior developers? Like, Puppet's internship program was my foot in the door of the industry. Now I find myself at a company about 36 engineers, even with 8 years experience. Like, I'm still the most junior person there. They haven't hired any junior engineers. I wonder how I might influence that. So build a more full company.
I love the way you're phrasing this, and I love the fact that you have the empathy and the experience to know the value of it, because you kind of grew up through that cycle. If you weren't given that opportunity, they wouldn't have the person that they have today. So let's talk about it through a few levels, because the thing about the influence component, there's a lot of people you got to influence in different ways. Same idea, different words. So if you're talking to the exec team, and you would have to learn, and there's ways you can find out, what is the hiring budget, personnel budget spend, right? And let's just say they say, look, we hire only mid to senior engineers. And what I would tend to do, look at that, is like, well, what is the cost for doing that? How long does it take us to hire people? Let's just make up a number, $400,000 total comp, insurance, benefits, pay, everything. $400,000 every single time. And so you go and list it out, like, well, what kind of work do we have? If you take someone for $400,000 and you have them restarting servers, writing shell scripts, there's a mismatch here. You can even survey the team. What type of work do you believe isn't the most important thing for someone of this caliber to be working on? Because every company has that kind of work. If you can spell out what that work is in finite detail, you would say, this is the type of work that the company depends on, that we have highly paid engineers doing, that will be more work appropriate for these particular skill levels. And also, for a progression standpoint, I need my mids and junior or senior people learning how to actually elevate themselves by mentoring that next loop. And also, there's just going to be the whole, you can't keep paying these people at their career trajectories. When someone comes in as senior, how much room do they have to grow? So you almost have to remind these companies of, like, here's what your developer loop is going to be. The average tenure at this company is 4 years. At some point, we're going to find a deadlock where we can't bring in people at these levels because it takes time to train them. For half the price, we can start training them now and create this pipeline. So I think you almost have to demonstrate. You have to write it down, actually. You have to show them the snapshot, give them the numbers, give them the data, do the homework for them so they can see it on paper. When you show it to them, they're going to tell you, no, we don't care. For now. When they have trouble filling roles, they can go back to that doc and be like, hey, what was that thing you said? The next thing I would say here is if there's no internship program, you can start one. You're going to write it down. You're going to explain exactly how it works, exactly how much it costs. You're going to volunteer to handhold that group of first interns. Maybe start with 2 of them. You're going to start the first internship program with these stated goals, with these stated benefits. Now it's on you. When those 2 interns come in, they got to rock it. You got to help them rock it. You got to show them the value. So don't have them work on things that no one cares about. Maybe get them involved in something that actually means something to the company. You've now implemented the very first internship. You got to write it down. You got to put your name on it. You got to call your shot, how much value will it deliver. You got to implement the program. You got to see it all the way through. You got to make sure people are recognized for it. Get a co-founder, someone who has influence at the company. Let them put their name on it. When you do these kind of things, then you set the culture. That's just how it works. Someone at Puppet came up with this idea. Luke Kanice let them run with it, and they did it. That's usually how it goes, because everybody else is just kind of in their own world. So that's the way I did it, and they're always going to say no. That's not the end of the story. This is why I like to write things down, and we can revisit it later. And then for me, if you think this is super important, you can help another company you don't work at start one. I think sometimes we think only our company can satisfy all of our particular needs. It's just not true. Maybe there's a company that, hey, we can't afford to hire you. Maybe you'll give us some advice. Help them start it. All right, so that's the way I would go about it. I had this phrase called different companies, same team. Long ago, I got rid of this idea that I only work for Google. There's a global landscape here, and the biggest raise that I got in my entire life came from Microsoft. And when I think about it is you can start these ideas, you can go meetups and talk about these ideas. So even if your company won't do it, maybe another person gets inspired to do it. That's all I have. Thank you all for the Q&A.